All right, welcome everyone to the August edition of the My Million Year Monthly Speaker Series. I'm your host, Bryant, and joining me is my co-host, Ed. We're both life coaches, and our goal is to help our community members realize and achieve their dreams. This summer has been a hectic one, so we thought it'd be great to close out the month with a few drinks with all of you. In my cup is an undisclosed beverage, but what I can disclose is that it is very enjoyable. Now, as our guest speaker this month, we're going to be talking to Jason Stein, who is the founder of Timber Ales, which has been ranked the best new brewery in the world in 2020 by Rate Beer. He'll tell us about how to turn passion into a profitable business, finding opportunity during the pandemic, and how to brew some of the best beer in the world, all from the comfort of your own home. But before we get there, we have a couple other things to talk about, starting with our financial tip of the month. As Ed presents, feel free to type questions into the chat. At the end of his segment, you'll also be given the chance to ask questions if you have anything to ask. So I'll turn things over to Ed. Ed, what do you got for us?
So this month, the tip of the month is a deeper look into tax strategy and how planning for it now makes a lot of difference in retirement. So last time we talked about the Roth conversion ladder, which kind of goes into that. So we're not going to cover that again, but we'll talk a little bit more about the different types of tax advantage accounts. So you're probably familiar with a lot of these. The main three ones are essentially your traditional IRAs, pre-tax 401ks. These are accounts that where right now you're not taxed when you save this money, but and the earnings are deferred. But when you withdraw, both the principal and the earnings are taxed as ordinary income. So whenever you withdraw that is when the taxes come. So this is a tax deferred account. Your Roth IRA or Roth 401ks, these are post-tax contributions. So you put in money that's already been taxed. All of the earnings, if you withdraw it the right way, is then tax-free. So when you withdraw this, everything's already paid for. This is a very, very powerful account. You generally want a lot of money in here because you don't have to worry about tax implications. Tax strategy kind of goes out the window because you know this money you can withdraw tax-free. And then lastly is your taxable account. This is also post-tax. This is the least tax advantage account because your earnings, your dividends, and any gains that you get throughout the year, these are taxed the year you get them. And then when you withdraw, you're again taxed again on the earnings portion. So if you've had the account and the stocks or whatever you're investing in for longer than a year, you'd be taxed by the long-term capital gains rates. If it's less than a year, then it's taxed as ordinary income. Any questions before I move on to any more advanced things than just like the basics of these types of tax accounts?
Maybe real quick, Ed, like how easy or difficult is it to open one of these accounts?
My guess is many of the people on this call already have them. So generally people start with your company 401k. It's fairly easy. You probably just have to go to your your company portal and select a contribution amount percentage, and it just automatically comes out of your paycheck. Those are the ones that people are probably most familiar with, your 401k ones. Opening up a taxable account is also pretty simple. You just have to decide which brokerage to go with. Some common ones might be Fidelity, Charles Schwab, Vanguard, and it's pretty simple to open up one of those accounts. It's kind of opening up a checking account, I would say. All right, so the question then always comes is, which one should you put money in, pre-tax or post-tax? This is a very difficult question to answer because it really depends on where you believe taxes will be in the future. So I put a chart here because I think it's a good example of how things have changed over time. I use the top marginal rate as an example for the federal tax rate. You'll see that not that long ago, like within our lifetimes, the top rate was really high, 70%. It's gone significantly lower then. So it's hard to say exactly where taxes will be in the future when we're in retirement and we're trying to pull this money back out. But the assumption when you put money in pre-tax is that your tax rate right now is higher than what it'll be when you take it out. But we really don't know what the taxes will look like, 50 years from now. So depending on when you're trying to retire, it's harder to predict. That said, I think there's still a lot of tax strategy that goes into it. So despite a lot of the uncertainty, I think you can prepare quite a bit. So I'm going to walk you through an example of what this might look like. So this is just an example of what the taxable income tax rates are for federal income. So you may be familiar with this, but taxes in the U.S. are progressive. So the more you make, the more that you will be taxed. But it happens incrementally. So the first $25,100 for a married couple is covered under the standard deduction. So 0% tax. If that's all you've made, or under that, you would get taxed 0% on that $25,100. Once you start earning more than $25,100, let's say you earned $25,200, the $25,100, 0% tax. The extra $100 would get taxed at 10%, and you would owe $10 to the federal government. And that's kind of how it goes along this chart. Another tax bracket to be aware of is the capital gains one, which people are probably less familiar with. I think people hear a lot like, oh, capital gains is taxed at 50%. That is true, but there's a pretty huge range here where capital gains are not taxed at all. So under $80,000 of capital gains, it's 0%, so no tax on that. And then above $500 and $1,000, which if you're lucky enough to be at, that's taxed at 20%. So putting this all together, the example I have is, let's say you're 55 years old, you're retired early, meaning you don't have any income right now, you also don't have Social Security, and you need to withdraw $100,000. So what might this look like when you're planning a tax strategy? So if you think back to the Roth conversion ladder, like I mentioned last month, you want to keep converting your pre-tax IRA money into Roth money whenever you can, because when you're in these low tax brackets, it kind of protects you, and then your money can start growing tax-free in the future. So step one, convert $25,100 into a Roth. Step two, you still need that $100,000 to spend, right? Because in this example, you still need $100,000 to actually spend. So you withdraw from your taxable account first before you want to touch your Roth. You want to leave your Roth accounts growing as long as possible, because that has all of those tax benefits. So when you withdraw from a taxable account, some of it is principal that you've already paid taxes on. It's hard to say exactly what percentage it'll be because it depends on how much gains that you've actually gotten over the years. So in this example, I'm assuming that half of the $100,000 that you're withdrawing is principal that doesn't need to be taxed again. The other $50,000 would need to be taxed. So let's put this all together then. So the $25,100 that you converted from pre-tax to post-tax Roth IRA, that's covered under the standard deduction up here, so you don't get taxed on that. When you start calculating the capital gains, not only do you have to count the $50,000 that's coming from your taxable account, you also need to count the $25,100 that you're converting to. That counts as income. So luckily in this example, because the way I drew it up, the total there is $75,100. So you're still underneath this $80,000 bracket. So key thing to note here that even though this chart is for capital gains only, it still counts your other taxable income as well. So you have to put those two together. And then the $50,000 that you withdrew is already taxed. So put that all together and you're able to withdraw your $100,000 and spend that without any taxes, any federal taxes. State taxes vary by state. Some states have no state tax. If you live in New York and New Jersey, income is taxed as ordinary income, so chances are you'd be taxed about 6%. But the federal brackets are really what hit you hard if you end up past these brackets up here. So this is something to think about as you're kind of preparing for your retirement. thinking about which types of accounts to use and how to switch between them in retirement to really minimize the taxes you have to pay, because that could really eat into your retirement. Any questions on this example or tax strategy? Right.
Hey, Ed.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Mark Chang.
Hey, Mark.
Hey. Hey, so I've converted traditional over to Roth, but can you go into kind of why you can't do it the other way around? I'm assuming it's the the pre-tax, post-tax rule.
Yeah, you can't convert post-tax money into pre-tax because the taxes have already been paid. You wouldn't be able to do that, and you kind of wouldn't want to do that either. It kind of depends on your tax strategy, I guess. The way I think about it, I am in if you're in a high tax bracket right now, especially because of the way I drew this out, if you assume that taxes will look something like this in the future, I think kind of up here in the tax brackets beyond, say, 100,000, I think there's a ton of uncertainty. It's really hard to say what the government will do in terms of changing tax rates. But down here, in terms of the standard deductions, I think we can pretty safely say that it'll be lower than what your marginal rate is today. So for most people who plan to retire earlier than probably like 59 or 65, I would say pre-tax is the way to go, and you'd want to save as much as you can pre-tax, and then from there move on to post-tax Roth stuff, and then finally your taxable accounts.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan of post-tax for the reason being with Roths letting that post-tax money grow and not having to worry about what taxes might look like when you withdraw. Sometimes, even if you're not sure where tax rates are going to be, just having that peace of mind, knowing that, okay, what I withdraw is going to be tax-free is kind of nice. So that's kind of one of the pros of doing the Roth contributions.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks, Ed, for that presentation on tax strategy. I think we never know where taxes are going to go, but there is good reason to look at both types of accounts and see what's going to work best for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Ed and I. I'm happy to discuss offline about what accounts might work best for your particular situation. All right, awesome. So next, we're on to community building. So for those of you who are new to the call, we'd like to do a community building segment to allow people to get to know each other a little bit better, to meet new people through the community. So what we're going to do is we're going to break out into breakout rooms, smaller groups of people to just chat with each other. So when we do so, introduce yourselves, give your name, location, your job, and then proceed to discuss today's community building question. Today we have two questions. One is, what is your favorite drink, alcoholic or non-alcoholic? And it could be the drink that you brought with you to today's call. And the second question is, if you could turn any one of your passions into a side hustle, what would it be? Which of those passions would it be? If you could turn a passion into a side hustle, which passion would that be? So we're going to go off and break out into breakout rooms. So have fun. Ed, send us away.
See you back here in 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Sounds good. See you soon.
Days.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Wait. Breakout rooms are
bit over. I hope you guys don't mind. We'll spend a little bit of extra time so we can fully dive into the life of Jason Stein and how he is turning water into beer and then beer into money. So, welcome back, everyone. Really excited to hear the responses from your breakout sessions. Feel free to post interesting insights or tidbits that you learned into the chat to share it with the rest of the group. So just as a reminder, as we go through and talk to Jason together, feel free to ask questions into the chat, enter it in, and we'll also leave some time at the end for you to ask Jason directly. So just as a quick reintroduction, Jason Stein is the founder of Timber Ales, a gypsy brewing company based out of the 12% Beer Project in North Haven, Connecticut. He started Timber Ales at the beginning of 2020, which is great timing, with the focus on developing a barrel program, which actually just launched this past May. Timber Ales received the accolade of Best New Brewery in the World by Rate Beer in 2020, based on the ratings of beers they have on the platform. On his day job, Jason is a senior manager at Ernst and Young, having spent 9 years in enterprise regulatory and governance, group and consulting. But we're here to talk about beer. So Jason, welcome to My Million Year.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I think we'd like to ask first, why do you like beer, Jason?
I think it's the community that the beer community is like a very inclusive community, and I really appreciate the people I've met through my interactions with beer, whether it's brewing beer, whether it's drinking beer with your friends at a bar. It's just very inclusive, and I really like the community it kind of fosters with everyone. I think it's what really drove me to it. It's what got me into beer, first drinking it and now brewing it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
How did you make that jump from like just drinking it into actually brewing it?
So got really interested in beer in college. When I graduated, my two friends in college actually started home brewing beer, joining competitions, homebrew competitions. So I always used to go over there and kind of ask questions, help out where I can. And eventually we made the transition into brewing myself. The reason why that transition was really made was that I started writing about beer. I was doing some articles for a magazine, writing about beer, critiquing beer, and I felt really it would be disservice to really give people critiques or review someone's beer without actually knowing how to brew beer myself. So I had my friends, Andrew and Matt, who were those friends I had in college and also home friends, and they taught me how to brew beer, and kind of just went full on in it. Really just kind of steamrolled right through it. It started out just as a 1 gallon project in my apartment, went to 5 gallons, went to my parents' house, and then went to what's now like 60 barrels. So
wow,
it scaled up quite fast.
Wow. And so you learned, so let me get this straight. So you learned brewing beer from your friends. At what point did the student become the master, and you were brewing better beer than your friends? And when did you realize that your beer was really good?
Not until I started sharing it, and it took some time. And I will say, to give them credit, I am still not the master over them. They spent more time doing it. We brew different styles, and I think the style that I learned to brew and kind of focus on being these barrel-aged stouts lent to a style that really had more attraction to the current beer scene now. So it's a different style that I really wanted to focus on than what they focused on. And I think that kind of helped propel myself into where I'm now.
Got it. Give us a little bit, for some of us who might be beer newbies, different types of beer, and where your particular niche is and focus is.
Yep. So my niche and focus that really got me into the commercial aspect has been these barrel-aged stouts. It's really a focus on developing base recipes that you can age in different types of spirit barrels, whether it's bourbon, whiskey, rum, cognac, and develop nuances into those beers by them spending time in that barrel just that combination of beer barrel time really lends itself to create these nuances that are unique, and every base and every barrel will create a completely unique flavor. I for a lot of my beers, I'll fill up 4 to 6 barrels. All 6 barrels will taste completely different, even if they're the exact same barrels, exact same beer. There's always going to be a different nuance to each one. So when it gets to that point, it's really about figuring out what flavors you want the consumer to really have. So we'll have beers that I will put on like an adjunct, like coconut. There'll be beers that I'll say, this is perfect as it is. Let's not put anything on it. So it's really a wide variety in terms of what you can get with that beer barrel time combination.
And how many different like varieties of beer are you brewing at any one time?
So for like 2020, we did, I think, 20 to 25 different beers, completely different, unique beers. All of them, while I say unique, all of them were different recipes, all of them different adjuncts. If it's a stout and I wanted to add like coconut or vanilla, but they're all either a stout, a barley wine, or an IPA. I kind of stay in my lane. Being that I'm really only brewing probably 2 beers at maximum a month. It's really not like I have a brewery where I'm brewing multiple beers a week, and I really am able to venture out of that lane. I kind of stick in my lane. I know what I can do, and that's kind of where I want to focus on, to make sure that I'm kind of putting the focus on the styles that I can do well, and not really venture out to other styles like lagers where I know it would be foreign to me, and then there's other people's beer that I'd rather drink, to be honest.
Got it. So were you inspired to get into these varieties because you enjoy drinking them the most, or is that how you got into stouts? And
yeah, so stouts was really, so my friends Andrew and Matt, it was a style that I gravitated towards, and there were certain styles, certain stouts that I enjoyed drinking that were impossible to get at the time in New York City. So I wanted to kind of figure out a way to recreate them myself. But the problem was Andrew and Matt, they had a different style that they wanted to brew, and I couldn't really push them to do that. So I focused on what I really wanted to get that I couldn't get on a commercial base at the time. So that's kind of where I put my focus on those stouts.
So you brewed what you wanted to drink,
basically. I brewed what I wanted to drink, but I will say I rarely, if ever, will drink my own beer now, just because I get too critical. Once I try something, I usually give most of the beer away, or I'll have a little bit and pour it out also, because it's normally like 12 to 13%, and that completely ruins someone's night if you try that. So I don't really drink much of it. I'll drink them to just do QC once in a while, do a few ounces and pour the rest out. But I tend to drink other people's beer. It's pretty rare that I am drinking my own beer.
Interesting. So then how did you make the jump from brewing at home and at one point in your parents' place to actually going commercial and partnering with a brewery? Yep.
So what really started was so I have a friend, Zach, who's the head brewer of 12%, and what that really means is there's a number of breweries at 12%. It's kind of like almost like a think tank, almost like there's about 10 to 12 of us. It's a combination of breweries that either don't have the space, or they're like me, where they don't have the space at their own brewery to really expand, so they go there. You'll see like Stillwater, other breweries, American Solera, which will not have the space, and they want to have 12% kind of brew their beer so they can expand to the Northeast. And then there's a few of us like myself, where 12% is our home. We don't brew anywhere else. And what Zach is the head brewer at 12%, meaning that he will, as like a gypsy / contract almost brewery, he will brew other people's beers. Zach was a friend of mine. I knew him from beer years ago, and I was between projects, I believe, in 2019, and he had said, like, we're looking to kind of expand into stouts. We don't really have breweries that are focusing on stouts. Would you ever consider doing your beer here? To which I said, probably. I don't have the time and money to invest in that. But he said, like, come up, talk to the owners, kind of feel it out, bring some of your barrel aged stouts. So went up, brought the beers, talked things through, and literally, I think probably 6 weeks later, we brewed the first beer. It kind of was just like that in terms of making the jump. In terms of like the scalability, I was very, very hesitant to do it because the scale is insane how much I'm going up. Just to give you guys an example, like I was brewing like 5 gallons, and then right now we're going at like 60 barrels, and like it's about 31 gallons per barrel. So it's like incrementally bigger. But like when it comes to beer, with recipes, everything's kind of a percentage. So you have your percentages of what you know. So you pretty much have to scale it up to the amount of grain you would need to kind of hit the targets and ABV you would want and scalability. So it was that, and also having that kind of relationship with Zach, knowing that he knew what I wanted. He could help me kind of scale it up. He had the experience. I could trust him. It kind of was a no-brainer, kind of making that jump and having him there.
Got it. So with this kind of like gypsy brewing company model, essentially, you own the recipes for what you come up with, right? And you're partnering with another brewery, essentially licensing your recipes to them to brew.
Yep. So I own all the recipes, the artwork, the names. I'm licensing them to distribute the beer. So I'm going up, driving up to brew it. They'll package it, they'll distribute. I will license sign forms to allow them to kind of package and license it out to where they have distribution contracts across the country.
Right. Wow.
It will rotate depending on what the beer is in terms of where it goes normally.
Got it. And how is that distribution done? What regions is your beer being distributed out to?
So the focus is definitely tri-state area.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I would say the other places that are pretty heavy is Charlotte. Like you said, Seattle. It does go to Seattle. I would say I've only seen certain styles go in the Seattle area. I do need to get more into Seattle because my little sister just moved out to Seattle last week to work for Amazon. So I do need to get more to go out there. But there, Virginia, Chicago, those are pretty much the main ones. I saw someone say Arizona. I've seen it in Arizona once. I think it's rare that it goes to Arizona. I think like the way it works is it depends on the volume of the beer. I know the last one we did was a sour IPA and a kettle sour, and I think that was the largest batch I've ever done. And I think I saw it hit like Arizona, Nashville, Seattle. Normally it will not hit those areas. It's normally either 60% of that size, and it will normally hit tri-state, Virginia, and sometimes Chicago.
Got it. That's interesting. And I think people want to see, judging by the chat, people want to see the types of beers that you've been brewing. Can we? And you've been very active on Instagram, with Timber Ales. Maybe we can bring that up and show the folks what your beer looks like.
Yep. So this one right here is the beer was called Maris Goes to Oceanside. The name Maris is because the main grain used in the barley wine is called Maris Otter. We brewed this beer as a home brew. It was me, Mindful Ales, and Horace Age Ales out of California. We did it as a home brew, I think it must have been like 3 or 4 years ago. And we created this fictional character called Maris, which was an otter because the grain's called Maris Otter. And it has him looking over the cliff in Oceanside, which was where one of the breweries was from, and trying to look in. But yeah, this is a cognac barrel. So when we fill these barrels, this was actually the first beer I ever did commercially. We filled 3 cognac and 3 Willet rye barrels. And then you'll see that kind of pouring it out of a nail. So we'll insert these nails, which are called Vinny nails, into the barrels, and starting like usually around 6 to 8 months, we'll start pulling the nails to kind of pull samples off to see how it's progressing, see the direction, if it's going the direction we expect, any concerns in terms of any infections. And we'll kind of use this in terms of every few months pulling the barrel to see how it's doing, to figure out when it's actually ready to be packaged. So for this beer in particular, brewed it in December 2019, packaged it in July last month. So it was like 18 months in barrels. We packaged, so there's 6 barrels. We packaged a cognac variant, the Willet Rye variant, and then we picked them a blend of Willet and cognac. But we kind of just went a month out before we packaged it, try each one, and then actually like sat there with like little cups blending them to see like what's the blend that works for each of these variants. We knew going in they wanted those 3, but it was more of a question of which barrels kind of married together to get the flavors you really wanted.
Wow. And you know, what's kind of like your approach when you're taste testing out, right, the different blends? Like is there a particular profile you typically go for? You know, is it a particular palate you have? Like what is it that drives those decisions?
Yep. So what really drives it is first, well, a barley one, I wasn't going to put anything on it, but for the stouts, like it's very popular in the craft beer scene today to have what they call quote unquote like pastry stouts, which are pretty much like you'll see coconut, you'll see all these desserts like they'll throw into beers, make a sweet profile of the beer. What I'm trying to do for Timber is we're trying to stay away from that. I'm trying to be more traditional, trying to not add adjuncts if we don't have to, or at least if we're going to kind of keep it simplistic. So the release before the one in this photo, which is I guess right above it, I think, Chasing Darkness. Yeah, that one. So that one, we did one that was non-adjunct. We did one that was just vanilla. What it's really different when I go to each beer. I think the goal is no adjuncts, and then it's if this barrel, this blend is not giving me what I want, what would be the right adjunct that would kind of get it to that over the hump. And I think, for example, for Chasing Darkness, we had 4 barrels, 2 of them 13-year Elijah Craig, 2 of them 14-year Elijah Craig. And what we kind of found was we really liked what the 14-year was giving us. The 13-year had this like spicy vanilla almost character, so we figured that we would just kind of treat it with vanilla. So we found vanilla that I really enjoyed from a beer that I had probably in 2014, and we treated it from there to kind of get the flavor profile that we want. So it's really, you're coming into it saying, how are we able to get the flavors we want with just a barrel? And if not, what adjunct do we need to kind of marry this to kind of get it to where we want? So it changes for every single beer.
Wow.
It's kind of, you figure it out like as you're going. Like I know for the next one, it's going to be a non-adjunct and a toasted coconut, and I can just tell by how deep the barrel character, how much the chocolate is, that it kind of will marry well with the kind of toasted coconut flavor. But again, we're trying to keep it non-adjunct, so we'll at least one of those barrels will not see any adjuncts. It'll just be completely the base barrel and the time.
Wow. And Jason, how long does this process take of experimenting, taste testing, typically take before you end up with that's it, this is the recipe that I want?
So for I would say for the base recipe, it takes a while. I would say Chasing Darkness, which was the first stout that we did, that I brewed multiple times at home.
Right.
I had barrel apple brandy and bourbon barrels in my own childhood bedroom that were filled with it. We were able to kind of get a sense of, or I was able to get a sense of what the barrel did to that base and what I liked about it. And then once we scaled it up, I was able to kind of select barrels, because that's also part of the process. Is every time I'm brewing a beer,
right,
is I'm like, what kind of spirit barrel work well with this? And so that's kind of another part of it. I knew for that one, I needed something that was old, something that had a little oxidation to it, that would lend well to that kind of base. And it's really honestly trial and error. A lot of these beers that I've done at the commercial level, they're the first time I'm doing them, most of them.
That's incredible. That's awesome. That's awesome. The other thing, Jason, I wanted to point out is that we can see from your Insta is there's a lot of interesting art that you have on your cans and bottles. Can you tell us about this and how you design your art?
Yep. So it's an interesting process. So this latest artwork, James Wu, California. This is actually his first label. Oh, second label for me, but the first one that I posted here. That was really more like artwork. So I had someone actually do my artwork when I did home brews, and I would usually commission someone to do it, like a base artwork. And then when I got to the kind of commercial level, I kind of had to find someone new that really could bring that to what I wanted to envision for Timber Ales, and what I thought was more of a nature scene, kind of bringing things together. You'll see a lot of the artwork will be pictures of whoever I'm collaborating with. So there's been examples of, like, I just did a beer with a place in Chicago. The last piece of artwork is New York City skyline with a bridge, bringing it together to downtown Chicago. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do for each beer, depending on what the style is, where the person's coming from that I'm brewing with. For this one, we're brewing it next week. It's called Fields of Fall. I like debated on doing a pumpkin stout for a while. It's a little bit gimmicky. It's a little annoying. I'm not a fan of them, but I just wanted to kind of bring it back to focusing on developing a base recipe and actually using real ingredients, rather than a lot of these beers. You'll see people who will use like extracts to kind of get flavors, because you can't get a lot of these flavors to impart into a beer. So for this one, it's really finding out the spices, the vanilla characteristics that would work well to kind of develop a pumpkin beer that's not fake. So that's kind of the envision here. And so it's really like they're all telling a story based on what I'm trying to get out of the beer.
I love that. Like truly inspired beers, from art to, what you're putting in your mouth. And that's awesome. I want to make sure we give some time for people to ask their questions too. I can keep going on and on, but just want to open up to the chat. Anyone have any questions they want to ask Jason?
I have a question. Where can I find this in the New York City area?
It's depends on where you live. It's in Brooklyn. It's in Manhattan. I don't know if it's in Queens, but it's definitely in Brooklyn and Manhattan. So it depends on where you live. It rotates every time. There's just few places in the city where I always know they are. It's always showing up. In Hell's Kitchen, there's two places that always have it. I don't know how they get it, but they've always had it. And then there's places downtown on Carmine Street that has it. There's places Upper West Side that has it. So really anywhere.
What's the Hell's Kitchen place? Let's plug it so that we can find it.
Clinton Street Deli. It's such a secret spot for beer, because it's like just looks like a small like deli on, I think it's like 48th and 10th, and you go in and it has the craziest beer selection. You would never expect it going in there. And I was always like, how is this place getting all these beers? And then once I started brewing, my beer started showing up too. So nice. They always have that. And then also there's a food emporium on, I feel like it's like 48th and 8th or something like that. There's a food emporium I know down there as well that always has, if you go down there now, they have every beer that I've done. And I don't know, I think it's because people haven't been really down that area during the pandemic, and so they just bought up every beer that I've ever done. And I went in a few months ago, and I was like, everything's just sitting there. And so I'd go back to there and grab cans and kind of do QC to see if beers are still holding up around the shelves. So those are two places that I always see it there. I don't know how they get it, but yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so Jason, we'll have to get from you offline the list of places where your beer shows up. We'll share that out, with the group, because I think people would definitely want to try your beers. It's going to be in high demand. So, so I guess it is 12% that is kind of guiding distribution for the most part.
Yeah, yeah. So the way it works is they have the distribution relationships. Unless I say I need my beer here. So for example, I'm canning a beer that I did with the brewery, and it's in Albany next week, and they were like, we'd love it if the beer was sold at a place near us, so that people who like our beer can get it too. If that's the case, I'll just say hey, can we get the beer up by the brewery? And what's great about 12% with that distribution relationship is I think they have distribution licenses in 30 states. So it's no matter where I'm doing a collaboration or if I'm doing a festival, or there's an event, I can say like, can you make sure like this beer goes there? And as long as I tell them beforehand, it's never really a problem.
Got it. That's awesome. Any other questions from the group?
Do you feel like your passion for beer grew from this journey, or do you think it's become more of like a source of stress, or like a little bit of work / grind?
I would say it's a little bit of both, I would say, because I think the consultant / sometimes project manager person in me wants things to kind of always be on a schedule, always following it, and that things never change. And I think that's the way we work kind of in like the financial industry, or as a consultant, like you don't have as much control when you're kind of partnering with other people in another industry. And I think it's something that I kind of learned to, I get stressed out about it, but at the same time I understand it because it's a completely different industry that I was never used to before I went in. So I think it's grown my passion in that I've thought more about the business side of things. Like anytime I'm making a beer, I'm thinking about like, what are the costs going in? What schedule is it for the pumpkin beer? Like, is this going to be released already around the same right time of the year for pumpkin beer? Like, so it's a lot of planning, a lot more organizing, but at the same time, the passion has gone up in terms of the business side of it, as well as thinking about different flavors in terms of recipes, which I really, as a home brewer, I did think about, but not as intensely as I do now, because I now, like if I did as a home brewer, like I can pour the beer out, I can let no one ever try it. Like once a beer goes in as a commercial, unless it's bad and we need to dump it, like it's going out to thousands of people, and it's kind of always on the back of your mind. So it pushes you to kind of think things through and plan things out a lot more. But at the same time, it's very stressful because until that beer gets in the can, you don't know what you envision is actually going to turn out.
Right.
What type of permits or I guess like licenses do you need to brew beer? I guess like in order for it to go commercial, you can't just brew in your home and then start selling it, right?
Yeah. So there's different types of brewery licenses. Some people have like farm licenses, which they're not actually like farm, but they allow people to brew different multiple locations. 12% has licenses to brew there as well as distribution. For me, in terms of licensing, I didn't need to get any licenses. The only thing I did to kind of start this was trademarks around the brand, LLCs to kind of build this up, because kind of want to keep it separate from my personal income, just to keep that asset separated. Also because tying back to Ed's original discussion, with this, I could do a SEP IRA. So I have an IRA as myself. I can do a SEP IRA because I can do a self-employment IRA as a business, so that, as an LLC. So that's kind of like the thought process going into it, I guess.
Great.
Any long-term future plans for next steps?
So right now I have probably like 70 different barrels that are actually in the brewery right now. The brewery is quite large. It's about 45,000 square feet. So we have a back room that's filled with barrels, filling barrels. I filled a bunch of barrels last week. Pappy Van Winkle barrels last week that came in. But as in terms of like next steps, like it's really it's kind of like once I brew a beer and it goes in the barrel, that's like another year and a half until I see that beer. And it's like I'm tying myself down to, I want to see this through every time I fill a new barrel. So as of now, like people keep asking, like, is there a plan to actually open up a brick and mortar spot? And for now, the answer is no. I just the beers are like have become what I want to see through once I put a beer in a barrel, and every time I do that, I kind of want to see it through. So as of now, nothing. I'm happy with the way it works out. The way it's structured allows me to continue my full-time job, and I have the trust in people at 12% and having the trust that I do have. And as I mentioned, Zach earlier, that things are to kind of get to where I want. So yeah, right now, just kind of it's really about now figuring out what these beers are going to come out of barrels. We've done it twice. The reception has been very well received so far. So it's really focusing on making sure that continues going forward. And it's always scary putting beers in barrels because you never know what's going to come out. Like we had beers that we filled on Saturday that the bung, which is like what you put on the top of the barrel and close it, kept popping off. And like everyone was going to be gone the next day because there was a hurricane hitting Connecticut. And I was like, if nobody's here and the bung pops off, which happened once before, like the whole barrel gets oxidized and the beer gets ruined. So I just sat there like literally duct taping barrel on top so like nothing could shoot it off, because we had the problem before where we've had one barrel where it shot off and we were like, well, now we just lost all the beer in the barrel. So yeah, it's a constant rolling plan going forward.
Right. I mean, it's incredible, how much progress you've made since launching in just 2020. I mean, you just started and you're already like rolling out 60, 70 barrels. So there is an element of scalability, right? Because as you develop a new recipe, that recipe exists. You can, they can just allocate more barrels to you and you can get more quantity.
Yeah. Yep. So the scalability exists. So we started with 30 barrels, which is 900 gallons. After COVID, we stopped for like 6 weeks because we thought everything would shut down because 12% distributions are their main business. And like with all bars shutting down across the country, you kind of lose a lot of that business. But what you found is like people are now finding new outlets and they're at home, so they want to drink more. So all of a sudden it went from pausing to now we can't do 30, we need to do 60 to meet it. So it just kind of snowballed from there. But like once again, like it's a system where it's a 30 barrel system. So doing 60 barrel, we just basically brew the beer twice. And the tanks that we have to kind of ferment everything was 60 barrels. So we do 2 runs of the same beer, not changing the amount of grain. We can't put any more grain in. We just do it twice. It goes into the fermenter, double the size. And even for 90 barrels, same thing. Do it 3 times, goes to the fermenter. So like the system itself where you're actually brewing is 30 barrels. So that's the maximum you can do. So when you scale it up to more, it's just basically brewing a beer multiple times.
Got it. Wow.
Do you have a favorite beer that you have brewed so far?
Yeah, I think it's between 2. I guess the last two barrel aged beers. Chasing Darkness was the first one, and that's probably a favorite just because it was the real the reason I got into this to begin with, because those beers that people tried and what 12% tried, that was Chasing Darkness. It was basically an evolving stout where I kept trying to make tweaks until I figured out what I really wanted. And those are the beers that went to barrels. As a home brewer, they were the same beers that went to barrels, and as a professional brewer. That's kind of like my baby, and where I've kind of kept that recipe, and I don't do any recipes similar to Chasing Darkness, just because I want to keep that one unique. But then I also like the Maris beer. It's the barley wine and brewing that with collaborating with Horace, say AJLs and Mindful Wells. It was such a fun beer to do as a home brewer, and like it's crazy to think that like that became like a commercial beer years later. So that's definitely, those 2 are definitely my favorites, I think.
Awesome. Well, gang, unfortunately, we're already hitting the top of the hour. I want to ask maybe just as one final question, Jason, for folks who are looking to start their own side hustle, or turn their passion into maybe something bigger. Any advice you have for those folks?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I think the pandemic really allowed, and it doesn't apply to me because I started this before the pandemic, but it kind of allows you to have more time to kind of think things through, kind of reevaluate what's important to you in your life. And I think it's important to really, whether it's before it was this, it was I had a blog, and that was my passion project. I'd write about beer. It's really finding that passion project and kind of your outlet so that you have something you could focus your energy in outside of your work. Obviously, your work life is important, but you got to find that balance somewhere, whether it's that, whether it's Mark running. It's like you need to find that passion. And I think whether you turn it into your passion project in terms of you're making money or you're just doing it because you enjoy and need that outlet, it's really important to kind of see that through. And for me, it was homebrewing as well. And then this happened by chance, and you sometimes have to take the risks and see where they lead you.
Right. That's sound advice, Jason. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your passion with us. It's not often that we get to literally taste the fruit of our own labor, but you do all the time when it comes to your barrels. We can't wait to someday, I think, maybe get together in person and try some of your beers together. Or maybe for some folks like Brett who are out in Arizona, we can throw a beer that way too. But thanks again so much. This is a lot of fun. We'll have to bring you back sometime.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you everyone so much for joining. Stay tuned for next month's event. We're going to have lots more fun speakers, hopefully enjoying drinks again in the future. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.